thank you so much for your very insightful and all the work that you've done. It's just fantastic to hear your message.
Thank you for all your stories. And so I think the very first one that I've gotten from the audience is just to follow up with Jake's invitation to tell what you told Senator Amy Klobuchar and all those other legislators back in their time.
Will Steger and I had the opportunity a couple of falls ago to do 2 big events in 2 days, one day, one the next. And we chose Princeton, Minnesota, and Grand Rapids, Minnesota. These are both very conservative communities. In fact, Grand Rapids was at a church 3 miles from the largest coal plant in the area. And we spoke to 600 people in 2 nights. And I brought my cards to them. And the cards were directed at Senator Amy Klobuchar because all of our members at Fresh Energy kept calling me up and saying, I haven't heard Senator Klobuchar say anything about what she's doing about climate change. And so these cards asked her to do something big about climate change. And I got so many, and it was just before Christmas, that I waited till Christmas was over. And then I boxed them up in a pretty box and included a cover letter that said, Senator Klobuchar, I want to tell you about these events we did. Told him exactly who was there, and I pointed out that one of the groups was a confirmation class in a Lutheran church. And when I saw all those families in front of me in Princeton, I read them the card and told them to think about it. And I said, a number of you have brought your kids, who are humans. And so, if your kids want to sign the card too, they can do that, and they can put down their age. 100% of the people signed the cards to Senator Klobuchar, including whole families. Liam, age 9, Joel, age 7. A big box of them went to Senator Klobuchar. And she said, Jay, you know I care deeply about climate change. And I said, unfortunately, Senator, none of my members have heard you say anything. And I suggested she should ask to get 10 minutes on the floor of the Senate. And then told her I was going to be in Washington, D.C. the next week on vacation, and I would come in to meet with her chief of staff. I met with her. We didn't have the usual conversation. I don't know if you've been in a conversation with a senator, but the first 10 minutes they spent talking about the weather in Minnesota. And her chief of staff walked in and she said, Jay, on Thursday or Friday of this week, Senator Klobuchar has 10 minutes on the floor of the Senate. What should she say? And I brought a folder with 10 pieces of paper in it. And I said, take a look at these things. She said all 10 of them on the floor of the Senate. So she was trying to prove to her constituents that she really had thought very deeply about it. And it was great.
So I've had a chance to kind of briefly look through this collection of questions we got from the audience. They generally fall into 2 broad types. One is about kind of individual actions and household things that we can do, and then the other one is more about national and global trends and different type of technology that can be adopted to kind of address this issue. So I'll start with the household one. So specifically, someone was interested in thinking about, you know, the trade-offs and the different types of things that we can do as a household. So invest in electrical vehicles, heat pumps, solar arrays in our homes. They were wondering about what you think are the most effective things that we can do as individuals and households to address this issue.
let me just give you one suggestion. And this is a technology that became available about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and now is much more widely available. And that's heat pump water heaters. So in our house, 5 years ago, we had, like vast majority of people do, a hot water heater that was powered by natural gas. And instead, as that water heater came to its end of its natural life, we bought a heat pump water heater. Now what that device does, it actually takes heat out of the ambient air of the basement and transfers it to the water in the tank. It is an extremely efficient way of creating hot water, because instead of creating heat, you're actually moving heat, taking it out of the ambient air and putting it into the water. What it also does is dehumidifies the basement. So how many of you have a water heater in the basement running natural gas, and at the same time you're running a dehumidifier? Here's a device that does both things at the same time. Heats your water and takes water out of the air in your basement simultaneously. So look into that. You want to say anything?
All right, I'll hop over to a question about kind of general trends. So electrification of the transportation system, right there. I'm paraphrasing some of the questions here, but you know, we've been hearing a lot about electric cars and then improvements in battery technology that enable this spread of popularity in electric cars. And so can you speak a little bit more about that process? Like how, to what extent have the technology evolved to the point that we can, as a nation, electrify our transportation system?
Yeah, now there are many more electric vehicles on the market, and you can also buy used electric vehicles that are much cheaper. You can get refunds for both of those. But the big thing is the extent that you can travel on an electric vehicle has now increased very greatly. And here's what you should think about when the IRA law gets rolled out. There's going to be a one-stop shop in Minnesota, in our energy agency, the Minnesota Department of Commerce, which is going to get all your questions answered. So that's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks. And what's very interesting is when you look at the IRA, it doesn't just go for 1 year. It will last at least through 2032. That means you have a total of 10 years to decide what you might like to invest in that maybe bring you much joy and much hot water, like a heat pump water heater. And you should definitely try the biggest thing you can do, because that'll make the biggest difference.
So just anecdotally, if any of you live in St. Paul or Minneapolis, you may have seen a lot of EV chargers suddenly popping up in public spaces. I know in our neighborhood in St. Paul, there have been many that have shown up in the last few months. And talking with the City of St. Paul EV coordinator, dozens more of these EV chargers are going to be showing up all over the place. They're going to be becoming ubiquitous. And also just one more plug for the heat pump water heater. We bought that 5 years ago with no rebate. And now that technology and all kinds of other energy efficiency technologies, as Jay said, is on sale through 2032. 30% credit off your taxes for your investments in those technologies. So a big incentive. We have a question in back.
And just related, how cold does your basement get?
So our basement, our house was built in 1923. It doesn't have any heat in the basement. And yes, the heat pump water heater takes heat out of the ambient air, so that definitely cools the basement in the wintertime. So if you use your basement as a recreation area, as an additional living space, you may have to add supplemental heat to that space to keep it comfortable in the wintertime. But my remote office is actually in the basement, just 8 feet away from our heat pump water heater. I work there all winter long.
We have room for one more question.
Okay, so we have
One
one
more
for
precise question.
one more question.
One concise answer.
So I'll just end with, on this personal note from someone who, so I love it that you touched on the long process of advocacy and how long these actions take place, right? And there's now, I think, some scholars in the audience who are, coming up as a new generation of people interested in these issues. Someone asked about advice that you have for someone who's might be a new professional delving into this area and want to make a high impact right away. What would you tell them?
I've thought, but you can go first. Well, when I think about the work that we need to do on climate change, there is no field of enterprise that can't or shouldn't be involved. We're talking about an all-of-society approach to addressing this issue. It's not just a STEM issue. It's not just science, technology, engineering, and math. It's accounting, it's finance, it's law, it's education, it's the arts, it's religion. Everyone needs to be involved. So no matter what your area of interest is, if you want to have an impact on climate change, think about what you want to do and how you merge your interest with your desire to pull the highest lever.
That's a great way to end.
All right. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, everyone.
Just a few more minutes if we just have your time, but that was actually a very nice